Welcome to Alabama Justice Lawyering Up. My name is Richard Jaffe, the senior partner in the Birmingham, Alabama law firm of Jaffe, Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight. We are going to explore with you the hottest cases, the most controversial topics of Alabama justice, and we're going to bring to you exciting key players that make our Alabama justice work or not work. We look forward to having you. Welcome to another show of Alabama Justice. I'm Richard Jaffe, and along with me is one of my partners, Brett Knight. And today we have a wonderful superstar guest, Doug Jones, who has already made a difference through his career throughout the state of Alabama and across the nation. Doug, welcome.
Thank you, Richard. It's great to be with you, my old friend who I've tried a bunch of cases with over the years.
We have indeed. Let's start off with just telling the viewers a little bit about who is Doug Jones.
Well, you know, Richard, I grew up here in the Birmingham area, Fairfield, as a matter of fact. Just a middle-class family, worked out at U.S. Steel, during college. Went to the University of Alabama and Cumberland School of Law right here in Birmingham. Had the great fortune of working in a little politics in my younger years. Worked with the late Senator Howell Heflin for a year right out of law school in the Senate Judiciary, and then came back as an assistant U.S. attorney. And since that time, my career's kind of interesting, flip-flopped. I'd go from prosecution to defense. Assistant U.S. attorney, then 13 years in private practice working with great lawyers like yourself. And then in 1997, I was appointed as the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, where I spent 4 years. Had a pretty good run there, and now back in private practice here in Birmingham, dabbling in a little politics again.
How does one become a United States Attorney?
Well, it's a combination of experience and politics. I mean, it's a political appointment. It's appointed by the President of the United States. It is confirmed by the Senate, the advice and consent. And so I'd worked that for a long time with Senator Heflin. One of the last things he did in 1996 before he retired was to send my name over to the President as his recommendation to be the United States Attorney. So there, and as you know, I had done my earlier stint as an assistant U.S. attorney. So most of my private practice had been in federal court. So I had a lot of experience, dealt with a lot of different people over the years, met a lot of people around the state, and it just all came together. It's one of those things that just worked perfectly. It took a while, but it just worked perfectly for me.
What does a United States Attorney do? And is that the most powerful law enforcement position in the state, or one of them?
Well, it's certainly one of them. There are 3 United States attorneys in Alabama. We have 3 districts: the Northern District of Alabama, the Middle District, and the Southern District. The Northern District, where I was the U.S. Attorney, is the largest. It comprises of 31 of the 67 counties, about half the population, from Birmingham and Tuscaloosa all the way north to Madison and back and forth. So it's a lot of folks. It is the chief federal law enforcement officer. You are the point person for the Department of Justice. United States Department of Justice, you answer to the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General of the United States, trying to not only enforce federal criminal laws, but there's a big civil component as well, where you represent other client agencies like NASA, those kind of things. So there's really a lot of components. The big office, there's an office in Huntsville. I will tell you, it's probably the greatest legal job I've ever had and ever will have.
Now, Doug, you mentioned earlier about how Mr. Heflin had a pretty big impact on you becoming the U.S. Attorney. Who is Mr. Heflin, and why should the citizens of Alabama know who he is?
Well, he is one of the more remarkable public officials that the state has ever seen. He was elected Chief Justice in 1970 and only served 1 term. And in doing so, he revolutionized the court system in Alabama. We had a really backward system. And he made it a point of forging an alliance to do a judicial article that changed and made the court system, put it in the modern age. And we're still reaping those benefits of our court system today, what Heflin put in place. And he only wanted to serve 1 term. He got his job done. But then he was so popular that he ran for the United States Senate to replace Senator John Sparkman, who had been there for a long, long time. I worked on that campaign. Heflin was a true statesman. He is the kind of politician we need more of these days, where he reached across the aisle and had friends would work with people on both sides of the aisle, reached across racial lines, economic lines. He was the kind of politician that I think everyone would agree, young, old, black, white, Hispanic. He was a true mentor and someone I miss dearly today.
What is the one thing you learned that was the most impactful on you as a person and as an attorney from Hal Heflin?
To listen to people, to have a dialogue with people, to try to stand in their shoes, as Atticus Finch would say. Heflin was a great listener. He could sit down with people that opposed him, and by the time it was all over, they felt like that he was their best friend. And I think that has been important as a trial lawyer, as a public servant, as a U.S. attorney, to be able to listen to people who come in and talk about real concerns that they have, and you can talk to them. I think in today's world, Richard, we have too many monologues where people talk at each other or to each other, and they don't talk with each other. And that's what we need, and that's what I learned, I think, from Heflin. He was just awesome about that.
We're going to have you back, of course, to talk about your current run that you recently announced for the United States Senate. Let me ask you this. What is the difference from your perspective in being a prosecutor and being a defense lawyer?
Well, when it really boils down to it, it just depends on which side of the table you're on, because every lawyer is to seek justice. That is to seek the truth. That's what the verdict means, is to seek the truth. And prosecutors have to do that. Defense lawyers are there to make sure the prosecutors do their role. I think that the main difference is, obviously, prosecutors have a lot of resources. They have juries because it's generally a criminal case. They have a jury sympathy. We always like to say sometimes, everybody knows about the presumption of innocence. But you can talk to defense lawyers and they'll tell you, well, I'm not so sure about that, because people come in to court with those biases and prejudices. I think the role of a defense lawyer is a much tougher role. They don't have the resources. They don't have particularly clients that people like sometimes. But they have probably one of the most important roles in our society, and that is to stand between the government and a prison cell for one of its citizens. And so for me, it was really an interesting kind of jumping back and forth. I don't know if I've told you this story before, but right before I became U.S. Attorney, I had the privilege of sitting next to former Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. And that was right after I had been on the board of the National Association.
And you were on the airplane.
On the airplane, that's right.
I remember it.
And I told her I'd been a defense lawyer and now I was becoming a U.S. attorney, and she thought that was fascinating. And she said, Doug, I've always advocated in this country that if defense lawyers and prosecutors could switch roles for a year and stand in the other's shoes, then our system of justice would be a lot more efficient and a lot fairer. And I've always remembered that, and it has served me well on being on both sides of that courtroom.
And I can tell you that I've repeated that story many times to many people,
right.
And that's the way it is really in England.
That's right. That's exactly what she talked about. She hoped that we could adopt that. Of course, it's really politically probably impossible for a lot of reasons. But the point, I think, being is that no matter which side of the courtroom you're on, you need to step back and take a look and see things from the other side's perspective. That's in criminal cases, it's in civil cases, because that's the best way you can understand your own case and how you can represent your client the best.
Now, Doug, bringing back to your time as a U.S. attorney, what is the most noticeable case that you can think of while you were the U.S. attorney of the Northern District?
That's easy. There were two. 4 months into my tenure, a bomb exploded at a women's clinic, and Eric Rudolph, we started the manhunt for Eric Rudolph, put together an incredible team. That was a day that I will never forget. Driving into work and hearing about that bomb, seeing the body of a police officer still at the clinic laying on the ground, coordinating the task force that ultimately led to his capture 5 years later. That was an amazing event, an amazing story of how that came together. And the other one, obviously, is the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where we had two cases where we convicted Tommy Blanton and Bobby Frank Cherry for the murder of those 4 children who died in that bomb blast. It was a moment in time in this country that people will never forget. It was a moment in time for this city because it went for so long without justice. And to be able to put those cases together and bring some healing to this community in a long-standing open wound was probably the most remarkable thing I've ever done and probably will ever do.
And of course, ironically, you had already left the United States Attorney's Office when I was appointed and asked to represent Eric Rudolph.
That's correct. That's correct. It was another one of those interesting ironies when two old friends have different views of a case. But you know, Rudolph ultimately pled guilty in Birmingham. He ultimately pled guilty to the bomb in Atlanta at Olympic Park. He is serving a life without parole sentence. And so justice was served, in my opinion, in that case. He clearly was guilty of the murder of that police officer and the bombings in Atlanta. And
he admitted it.
And he admitted it. And I'll tell you, Richard, I know he was your client, but I sat through that guilty plea. I sat through his sentencing, and he was frightening. I've never seen someone talk in which I didn't believe there was a soul behind their eyes. He was cold-blooded.
And the other point that underscores your answer is that as defense lawyers, sometimes we have to step up and represent
Absolutely.
the most unpopular to make our system and our freedoms work.
No question about it. That's why I said I thought that defense lawyers, in my view, are the most important part of our system of justice, whether it's civil or criminal, because they are often unpopular clients. They're often clients that juries do not like. And your job is not to prove them. That's an interesting thing that people always say. How can you represent those people? They're guilty. Well, you're not buying into what they did. You're simply being there to make sure that we as a civilized society prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they did the crime before you incarcerate them. Because it's pretty drastic when somebody gets into an Alabama prison or a federal prison these days. And so the role of the defense lawyer truly is liberty's last champion.
And justice is the bottom line no matter what side you're on.
Sure. And people will often see not guilties and say that justice was not served. But that's because they didn't sit through that courtroom. They didn't listen to all the evidence. They're listening to the media. I think justice generally is served. Do juries always get it right? No. They're human beings like we are. But I think by and large, our system of justice with a jury system generally gets it right.
Well, in our next segment, we are going to really explore the church bombings and your upcoming book.
Absolutely.
Head to Carl Cannon. Their dream team makes it real easy to do business.
Here at Carl Cannon Chevrolet, we offer a wide variety of vehicles. Trucks is one of our main things that we have here. We offer them that can be dinghy-towed, flat-towed, and we also have vehicles that can tow between 3,500 pounds all the way to 17,500 pounds. So if you need a vehicle that can just take you to church on Sundays or pull the load on Mondays, we've got them all right here for you at Carl Cannon. Been here for 50 years. Come see us in Jasper.
Other dealers can't? Cannon can.
Carl Cannon, Chevy Buick GMC Cadillac in Jasper.
Every day, students at Bevel State Community College tell their own stories. They tell them through the accomplishments they achieve, the choices they make for career success, and through recommendations they share with friends. With 5 locations serving 7 counties and tuition lower than 4-year colleges, now is the time to start writing your own success story. Your story starts at Bevel State.
Welcome back with our wonderful guest, Doug Jones. Such an honor to have him here. Let's talk about justice. Let's talk about your upcoming book. Let's talk about the church bombings.
Sure.
So tell me what the name of your upcoming book is.
Well, the book is going to be titled Seeking Justice because I think that title captures, obviously, the church bombing cases. Everything is centered around the civil rights, and my growing up in the civil rights era and in high school, and then watching the first of the cases that Bill Baxley tried, and then trying those two cases. So everything is centered around that. But I think there's a lot of lessons for seeking justice from those cases that are lessons still today for not only lawyers, but I think for the community in general.
Now, Doug, we discussed during the break your involvement in the Church Street bombings while you were a U.S. attorney, but there was some overlap in the state. Can you explain a little bit more in detail?
The case was really opened up. The 16th Street case was really opened up by the FBI. But because there was issues of jurisdiction at the time, we brought the state involved. Then District Attorney David Barber's office was involved. Jeff Wallace, a former DA who you've tried a lot of cases with or against, was involved. And we knew that there was kind of a thin jurisdictional element because the statute of limitations had run in federal court. And ultimately, that's what we were able to show. We were able to develop enough evidence that we believed that we could prove the case, but we couldn't prove that jurisdictional element for federal court. So there are procedures in place to where you can take a federal investigation like that and get in grand jury work and get approval by the Attorney General of the United States, in this case Janet Reno, and take it over to a state grand jury with their approval, David Barber, and then Attorney General Bill Pryor. And that's where we did. So the cases actually got tried, even though I was U.S. Attorney, got tried in state court, which, as we've discussed, Richard, is really, I think, the appropriate place for these cases to have always been. Because the style of any case, a criminal case, is the state of Alabama versus the defendant, Tommy Blanton, or state of Alabama versus Bobby Frank Cherry. And that's really, I think, where the cases should have been because, frankly, as we all know, it was the state of Alabama in the 50s and 60s that let down the civil rights community, the black community in this city and in this state with all of these criminal justice issues. So to be able to put it back in state court, I think was the most appropriate thing to do.
The statute of limitations, is there a statute of limitations in state court for a heinous crime like murder?
No, there is not. And that allowed us to go into state court. At the time this bomb blew up and killed these young girls, there was no murder statute per se in federal court. It was a civil rights crime. Mm-hmm. And even then, the statute of limitation was 5 years. And so there was no prosecutions in the 60s. J. Edgar Hoover with the FBI closed the file out. The state at the time did virtually no investigation. And in fact, Bill Baxley likes to tell you that